Welcome to Beyond Sundays, a podcast from two friends trying to follow Jesus more closely. Odds are you won't always agree with us, and we'll stumble along the way, but we promise to be open and honest all the way through. I'm Matt, here with Hannah. We love our community and appreciate your time on this journey with us. You can help us grow this community by sharing our links at beyondsundays.pod.com. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, and text our Apple and Spotify links to 5 of your friends. We cannot say thanks enough for your time. Hannah, mental health check. How are you?
Oh, 1 out of 10. Probably.
You're a 1 out of 10?
No.
Oh,
Like,
scale
I'm
of 1 to
sorry,
10.
zero,
Okay,
zero to 10.
scale 1 to 10.
Scale 1 to
Got
10.
it.
There we go.
Got it.
I would say I'm probably a 6, which is not bad, I don't think.
Okay, no, I think that's really great. Listeners, what you're getting is Hannah pre-Legacy Connect, which
Yep.
this episode will come out after. But this is a huge event, and she takes on just like a massive burden and you know how it is. It's just this thing needs to get done, and this
Yeah.
thing needs. It's just an endless checklist. So, what's your kind of process when you're processing through that?
So I did really well this time separating things into weeks. Like,
Oh,
this
good.
needs to be done this week. This needs to be done this week. This needs to be done this week. So I feel like I'm on the very tail end of that, which I should be, where it's just the pieces falling into place. But those are the pieces that are kind of out of control. Like you can't control. It's just a waiting game. So you feel a little crazy. Then there's also that excitement. So it's like crazy,
Mm.
but excitement at the same time. I think it's going to be really good, though. I think the
Yeah,
whole
I'm
event's
sure it's
going to
going
be
to be great.
good.
Yeah. When I have a to-do list like that,
Uh-huh.
I hate when I've got it set, it's ready, it's on my list, but I can't check it off yet. It just drives me insane.
Yeah, it's
I
awful.
never stop thinking about it. It's like it's going to get done. It's going to be fine. I've got everything ready for it, but I just can't get it done yet. And it makes me want to
Well,
scream.
what's crazy, and I don't know if you remember this, but we were in a leadership meeting at the church we attended before years ago. And there was a guy who was in charge of something like that. And he talked about when you set to-do lists or something about doing them like based on these are the things I can do now. These are the things I can do later. So I now in my planner, which my planner looks a lot like my brain works, just insane. But I will go write things in the week they need to be done. So it's not on like a list that I'm seeing
Okay, you
all
can't
the
even
time.
see it. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
smart.
because if I do that, then it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But I know when it's time, it will pop back up. So that helps me a lot. Other than
I am
that,
not
though,
like that. I'm not like that.
even
I
if you
have
write it down, it still makes
yeah,
you.
even if I write it down and don't look at it, you know what happens is I'll lay in bed and it's in sight, in mind. Then it just pops back in. I'm like, okay, that needs to get done. Then and I'm literally like, Matt, there are 2 days that you can't do anything about this. And then like the other
Yeah.
Matt is like, yeah, but I know, but we have to get that checked off our to-do list. I don't know what to do right now.
You
Yep.
know, and I ask
Really
myself this
bad.
question today. I ask myself this today. Liam and I have been using Chat GPT to like
Just
navigate,
live.
just to live, yeah, to navigate certain things. It really does a good job. But I typed a question that I want to ask myself is, do I have trouble starting things that require in-depth thinking or things that
Mm,
are on top of the list? I can't
mm,
tell which one of those it is, if it's really hard for me to start things that my brain takes a lot to do, or if it's genuinely because it's so high priority on the list.
mm.
I don't know. And so that causes me a lot of weird anxiety. And as you know, makes me take 100 years to complete things that should not take me 100 years. So I don't
Yes.
know. I'm going to ask
Yeah.
ChatGPT though.
Okay, I will be interested to see what ChatGPT. I feel like ChatGPT is wonderful for create a list of options, create a list of ways to say this, create a list of things. But I feel like when you ask it kind of philosophical questions like that, the answers I've always seen it give, and this is fine,
Sure.
but the answers are always like, well, it really depends on each person and how they approach the world. You know what I mean? It just tries to
Okay.
give like that general kind of stuff.
Shouts to this. There's a
All right.
prompt I need to send you.
Oh.
And it gives like it's like you say something about asking 10 questions and you ask it to help you identify almost like truths inside yourself that you don't recognize, and then how
Okay.
to put things in place to uncover those and to change or praise those or whatever it may be. It gave me really in-depth stuff like, oh, you must be, it's because you wear this
Hmm.
as a bird and blah blah blah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, for me, that will never replace face-to-face counseling. Like it just for me, it's like, okay, it gives me a tool. And then I'm going to talk for 25 minutes to Liam or go sit in an hour counseling
Yeah.
session with
Yeah.
someone to talk through it more. For
Yeah.
someone like Liam, he really likes it.
Mm.
He's not going to need the additional, let me go
It
sit in a
just helps you
counseling.
identify things. Yeah. I listen, I think ChatGPT is like, and this is obvious, but it's just like one of the biggest marketing, human being,
Mm-hmm.
technology, any of it changes that we have experienced within our lifetimes because Siri is so dumb and Alexa
I
is
don't use it.
it is so dumb. It's frustrating to even use. But ChatGPT, it'll pop stuff out and I'm like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
It just helps you recognize and do things. And I think it's
Yeah.
great. I really do.
Have you noticed that Google, when you search in Google, it's kind of taking the Chat GPT approach now?
Hmm.
I thought it
There's like
was
the
Chat GPT.
Gemini thing, whatever Google's version of it. Google has their own AI, and so I think
Mm-hmm.
they try to do that up the top. Listen, I kind of find that to be helpful
I
too,
do
honestly.
too.
Yeah,
I really do.
yeah.
So when it comes to this big meeting and or conference, I should say, I do feel like ChatGPT has helped me, whether it's in my emotional side. It'll even give you spiritual, like if you are spiritual, here are some scriptures to go along with what you're. I'm like, oh, it's even preaching to me now.
Yeah. Listen, if
So
it's going to be there and it just gets this buffet of things that you can take a look over and you can look at, I think it's wonderful. I really
I
do.
think so too. One
I
last
do.
thing I have to say is
Yeah,
my
please.
dad's been sending me these videos, these reels on Facebook where if Jesus was alive during our time and was an influencer, and it's like Jesus taking videos of himself, and he's like, okay, guys, just to let you know, there's a disciple here that's about to, kiss my cheek and turn me in. I just want to let you guys know I'm signing off for the last time and just things like that. It's super, super good
Smash
though.
the subscribe button and yeah, yeah, yeah. I just saw that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah,
hilarious.
it's
Yeah.
awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, I do have one last tech note for our listeners, and that is that you should be listening to this, and I would argue all of your podcasts on 1.5 speed. So if you're on Apple or you're on Spotify, I do this with all of mine. The human mind's attention span can handle 450 words per minute spoken.
Hmm.
Hannah and I are probably speaking somewhere around 150 words per minute.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I don't think you want to turn your podcast up so far that it like maxes out your ability to do anything else. But sometimes you're listening to a podcast and driving or doing the dishes or exercising something else. I think if you just click that speed up to 1.5, it just helps fill your brain a little bit more. And so I just think that's a pro move. And so
I need
it
to try it.
second to adjust. It'll take if you're doing you'll come back on. It wasn't like you know what I mean. It'll take you a little, but then once you get adjusted, it's like okay, in
Yeah.
the flow better. I really like it a lot more. I really wish I could just live my life speed. Honestly, every conversation, everything I have to do, it would be so great because I just get kind of I get kind of lost in the attention mall sometimes.
Hmm. I need to try it. I'm not sure if I'm a fan yet. I've tried it once, I should say. And I was like, this is kind of weird.
You got to give it a little bit of time to adjust, but
Yeah.
Hannah, what we're going to do today is we are going to take a look at the curious case of Ehud, the left hand. And I wish that this was the kind of podcast where we just had like editors to go over the top of us. And every time we said Ehud, there was some kind of like dramatic music that played
Da,
because,
da, da.
yeah, okay, sure, that this is real spy stuff. I mean, it really is. Like he's infiltrating. Anyway, we will tell the story. So what I think we should do here off the top is we'll talk about the lessons of Ehud and if you can draw too many lessons from the Bible sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing to do here is we just need to take 10 minutes on 1.5 speed and we just need to tell the story of Ehud because
Yep.
people may not be super familiar with it. So it's found in Judges chapter 3. You can go read. There's probably a chunk of 10 or 15 scriptures there. And this is one of those times when a foreign power is ruling over Israel because of their unbelief and their disbelief in God and not following his commands. This time it happens to be Moab. Anytime you hear Moab in the Bible, it is just not a good situation.
Mm-hmm.
Moab is descended from, check this out, descended from Lot, whose wife turned into the pillar
Mm.
of salt that we talked about last week. He's descended from Lot and Lot's daughter in an
Interesting.
incestuous relationship. So
Oh,
that is,
oh, oh,
yes, Lot and Lot's daughter. Yes, let that sink in for a minute.
oh.
Yeah. So that is the
I
progenitor
did
of
not know
Moab.
that.
Yes, the family tree just kind of crashes in on itself, and that's not a good situation.
Yikes.
this is the same king that Balak hired Balaam to
Hmm.
curse Israel and the talking donkey. This is the same kind of thing. Ruth in the book of Ruth, one of my favorite characters in the Bible, was from Moab. And then the last thing was their god Chemosh, ChemOsh, was worshipped with child sacrifice. So
Oh
Hannah,
my
these
gosh.
these were the people that were ruling over Israel at the time.
Uh, which is scary. I
All
don't
of it
even know
is.
what to say. I did
Yeah.
not know that they were, it was Lot and Lot's daughter. I
Yeah.
didn't know they had children, but you hear
Yeah.
them referred to over and over again. And I will say,
Hmm.
they end up being a part of the lineage of Jesus. If,
Ruth does. Yeah.
well, yeah, but being from Moab. Well,
They're
no,
they're
she was,
real close. She was from Moab. She married
okay,
Naomi, took her kids over there. They got married. She came back. Yeah, that's we should
okay.
probably just do a Ruth episode sometimes because it is remarkable. But
It is.
just that in and of itself, where Ruth is from, you know what I mean? It's not just like, oh yeah, she's from down the street. It's like, oh, she's from one of the worst places we can think of in our
There's
lives.
so much context in the Bible that we miss and don't
Yes.
recognize is so important.
Yes, like in Judges 3, we're just skimming along, and it's like, yeah, the Moabites, and we're like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. But we,
Yeah.
if you lived in the time, you would be like, oh, these guys are super villains, you know?
Yeah, and you hear them referred to a lot. It's like you
Yes,
mentioned, it's
they're
not
right
just
there,
one time. They're there a lot. They take
right?
over Israel a lot,
They do take over
you know?
everybody around. Everybody's going to get a shot. You know, in the Old Testament, Israel's just going to disobey, and everybody's going to get their 15 seconds of fame ruling over Israel.
Well,
It's a tough look.
and this whole chapter, and we may get into this a little bit, but that whole
Yeah.
chapter is this same thing. Like the very
Oh yeah.
beginning,
Yep.
at the top of the chapter, it even says, Lord, he lifts nations to test Israelites who had not experienced any ways or any wars in Canaan. And then it was to teach them warfare, and they're testing to see if they would obey the Lord's commandments. So literally, that's all about him just turning them over to people to take over Israel. That's crazy to me that this is
It is.
happening.
It's a test. Yeah. It is also not my favorite like part of thinking about God, but this is as much, you know what I'm saying? Like this is as much God doing this as is God climbing into human flesh and getting on a cross. It's the same God.
Well,
That's
yeah, and
hard to
they
wrap your
continue,
mind around sometimes.
but they keep choosing it. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not like God's just like, well, I don't know. He does say he wants to teach them
He's
warfare.
stressing them. Yeah. Got to
You
get
know,
that
so
spear sharp, baby. So Israel cries out. And the Bible is frustratingly vague here, and it just says Ehud, the left-handed man, a
mhm.
Benjamite, is called to be the deliverer of Israel. He promptly, as any deliverer should, really forges himself a 1.5 foot long, double-edged sword. Now, Hannah, I have a serious question for you here, and this is going to be a Star Wars question. And I know you're not a Star Wars person, but I know you're related to Star Wars people. When that says a double-edged sword, are you reading
Mhm.
that like it's got a hilt at the bottom and then the sword comes up and it's sharp on both sides? Are you reading that it is a sword on one side, there is a hilt, and then there's like a double blade underneath?
Yes, and Drew has one of those lightsabers.
You are reading that this is a hilt and two swords coming out from both directions.
Yeah, that's how I'm reading it. That was the
Okay.
first vision I had. Yeah.
Great. I love this. I'm not sure if that's right or not because I was thinking that it could just be hilt, single sword, and sharp on, you know what I mean, double edged, like sharp on both sides of the single blade.
Oh.
But in my mind, too, Ehud is strapping this double bladed lightsaber to his leg. And I just like that version better. So I think we're just going to go with
I
it.
do too. And a foot and a half. I mean, that's really not super big. I
No,
don't
no, no, no.
think.
He's got to get it in. He's got to get it in. Well,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what he does. So he requests an audience with the Moabite king. He's there. And then when he's there, how this happens exactly, some kind of pull, or they must have known because then he requests a private, and the king, that guy, will in a second. This king just happens large gentleman. It clears the guards out, grants Ehud one meeting with him, which I don't know that happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things with that I thought were interesting. They bring him a tribute,
Yeah.
so the gift must have been worth enough that he was okay having a one-on-one meeting with this guy.
Somehow something happened. I mean, Moab is ruling over Israel, and that's what you do. You pay tribute to whoever's ruling over you.
So,
So
okay, so it
I
wasn't
think
just a
Ehud
gift.
is no. I mean it was a gift, but I think Ehud was coming like oh, great ruler. I think Ehud was playing the game with this guy to get
And
into the
he
room
was
with him.
representing all of Israel in this.
Apparently,
Okay, so
right?
that's interesting. And I also want to say, you said he was a large guy. The Bible says he was fat.
Yes, he was
That's,
fat.
I
I
mean,
was
that
just trying to be
I know, but
sure.
I, it's the same with when we talk about Leah in the Bible. It, it says she
She
was
ugly.
ugly.
Yeah.
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 And that stuff, it's like, man, we got to call that out. They literally say he was fat. I'm like, man, Lord, way to call
Well,
us all out here.
listen, so Ehud and the Fat King, they withdraw to a room by themselves.
Mhm.
Ehud, the left-handed man, pulls his double-sided, double-edged, double whatever it was, lightsaber off of his thigh. This, guys, go read this in the Bible. It's in Judges 3. Thrusts it into the king's belly. And then it says the king's belly fat sucked in the sword so that it didn't come out. His bowels evacuated all over the floor. Ehud slips out. The guards are kind of like waiting outside, like, what's going on? And then literally the guards say to each other in the Bible, well, he must be using the bathroom, giving Ehud time to slip out after he just disemboweled the fat king. Hannah, that's all
Yeah.
in
I
the
mean,
Bible. That is all in the
and
Bible.
I have so many questions. Like, I want to know scientifically,
Oh,
how did, I mean, it is, it's in the Bible. The fat ate it up.
the fat ate the sword. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and that sounds extremely painful and awful, but like, how sharp did it have to be? How much fat did there have to be? Like, what was that whole experience? Because originally I thought when I'm thinking through this story
Yeah.
that he must have been large enough that he couldn't get up. But it says they got up and went to another room.
Right. He's in there by himself. The guards are thinking, well, he's using the bathroom, which leads you to believe that that's something he took care of on his own.
Yeah, so I'm like, how did I just want a scientist to come through and kind of explain to me how this works. And also, where did they think that Ehud went? You know?
Well, he slipped out the porch. Well, right. I think that's just part of this. I think just Ehud gets away because this story finishes that Ehud then leads a military assault on the
Mm-hmm.
Moabites and don't have their king, and they're able to defeat the Moabite army. I don't really think Ehud was worried too much about. They figured out that he did it because the next part of his plan was to just rally the troops and go try to beat the leaderless Moabites.
Well, and two things I want to say about that is
Yeah.
that leader part. So he
Yeah.
came and attacked them when they didn't have a leader. But
Mm.
also I think it's 3 stories in Judges 3 that it tells of Israel being taken
Hmm.
captive and then somebody being rising up. So it's
Hmm.
this cycle. But in order, so they cry out to God, and then he always has a leader rise up.
Yeah.
And then when the leader dies, they turn away from the Lord.
Yes. Yep.
So there's this heavy weight on the idea that there needs to be a leader. There needs
Mm.
to be somebody in charge. And without that, people do whatever they want. And I just find that so interesting. And I find that as a topic that I think at some point we really should explore because it's three or four stories in this chapter that's repeated.
Well, that's how Judges starts. The whole book starts in the time of the Judges when everyone did what was right in their own sight.
Yeah.
And, I think politically speaking, I guess God was like, okay, look, you've got everybody's individually got my commandments. So, I mean, honestly, you should be able to follow them. It's
Yeah.
not like it's that difficult. You guys should be able to handle this on their own. And then obviously human nature takes over and they're not able to. But I mean, there were better times then when they switched over to kings, but then there were kings in Israel that like just had them doing crazy sin stuff too. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a principle of like leadership and organization, and people do better with that with God. But then also there's the flip side of that principle that doesn't guarantee that everything's going to
No.
be perfect or good just because there's a leader.
No. And one other thing that I find interesting is it makes me reflective in like my life, and I'm sure in your life you think about this, but sometimes when we're serving or helping or doing good in something and
Mm,
we see it kind of not fall to the wayside, but we may not see the results that we want, or
mhm.
when somebody goes away or passes away, it kind of dwindles and falls apart. I think we think that we're not successful or that we didn't do
Mm,
God's work or the revival didn't happen. But even Moses
sure.
led the people out. And when Moses died, they still turned away from God. But it doesn't mean that what Moses didn't make a difference. And so I
He did
find
it.
that super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting thing to think about. It's like you're fulfilling the call of God on your life right then and there. You're doing what you're
Yeah.
supposed to be doing. And then I mean, you really can't control what comes after you. You really just have to focus on what you're doing in that moment.
Well, and there's a part of that's that's frustrating to me too, though, because
Mm,
why I get like, why did he have to be there for that to happen? Why couldn't
yeah.
people have just continued? Why didn't
Yeah.
somebody stay at, why? I guess because evil people came and they took over and led in a different direction. But either way, I just
Yeah.
find that
So
frustrating but
we're on the
interesting.
second annual Legacy Connect, and
Hmm.
you're worried about if there's going to be a 25th annual Legacy Connect because you're not going to still be doing it at that point, you
Yeah.
know?
And is it going to be successful, or is all my hard work going to just fall apart? But it's not about
You
me.
just
Yeah,
you just do what you're doing in this moment, and then
you
somebody
do.
else will get a different burden and God, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
that's
Yes.
just kind of
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
God works.
Yeah.
So the bigger issue to me, although you did raise some really interesting leadership stuff that I wasn't even thinking about with this story, because the first thing that hit me was like, why are the weird parts of the Bible there? Because I think there are times, and maybe this is not true for everybody, but I think this is how we think about it. There are times when we kind of like anesthetize the Bible, or we like
Yeah.
clean it up, or like make it holy. And there are a ton. I mean, we could do weeks of episodes in a row on really, really weird stories in the Bible.
Yeah.
And it just calls into question, like, why does God put that kind of stuff in there? We have the details about this guy's belly fat sucking in this sword. Like, what is that in there for?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer. I mean, I originally start to think maybe it makes it relatable.
Mm,
I wonder also context of the time. Was there something that um made more sense to them then? I love it now for pure entertainment, you know?
sure.
And I mean that in a good way. Like it
Right.
draws you in and you
You're
still
interested in the
you're
Bible. Yeah.
interested in the Bible.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because growing up, it was hard to I was reading the King James version as you know,
Sure.
as a young kid, so you didn't quite understand. But I didn't know these stories. Like this story here,
Mm,
I had never heard this story before.
mm.
And so then I wonder, why are we not pulling lessons from some of these odd stories, especially I say especially for youth ministry, but even adults. Like this is good stuff.
There are compelling real narratives, and I think you're not like officially naming it or anything, but I think you're hinting at one of the main reasons why this stuff is in there, because God, I think God does want people to be attracted to his word.
Yeah.
That you can't come to the Bible, because if you approach the Bible with just like, oh, I have to read these rules and make sure that I check this box, and if
Yeah.
you're looking at the Bible like that, then you're not getting the Bible's alive, right?
Yeah.
Jesus is the Word, and if that's kind of how you're approaching it, like I think there needs to be some weird stuff in there, because this is what I also think it says about God. God uses the people that are in front of him,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He does, and he uses people in their culture, he uses people in their time, and he uses people in their ways. And so like you'll sometimes hear people debate things like, I don't know, should we be using the internet to reach people, or blah blah blah. And I'm just thinking like, well, look, God's going to use people in this time, in our
Yeah.
culture, in our ways, right? It's not like God is broken somehow. So yeah,
No.
he's using these weird people with these messed up backgrounds and these weird stories, because that's who he has in front of him, and that's who's willing.
Well, yeah, like you said, they're real people. And
Yeah.
again, it makes it relatable. And I also think that it just shows this bigger picture of God understanding humanity and how
Yes.
we work, that we want a story that's
Yes.
relatable, but
Yes.
truthfully, honestly, compelling.
Mm.
And so I don't know how they read this story or what they thought of this story thousands of years ago. But I know reading this story now, I am compelled, I'm pulled in primarily because of the belly fat that sucked up the sword. But the
It's hitting you in
message
the right
in it,
spot. Yeah.
it is. But the message, that's my kind of humor. But the message it is so much bigger than that. And so I feel like God, it shows that he goes beyond just what's happening culturally then. He
Yes.
understands that as a human race, we want things that are interesting and
Mm.
kind of wild. But
Mm.
again, that's real life.
Hmm.
That's really what goes on in people's lives.
I think it should lead us to kind of demystify biblical
Yeah.
characters. Now, I get to be of two minds about this, because on the one hand, let's just pick, I don't know, Paul or David, like some of the
Hmm.
titans of the Bible. Should we venerate those people and like have respect for them? I think we
Yeah.
should, right? But on the other hand, we can't forget that like Paul's just a dude, and David is
Just a
just a
dude.
dude, and Moses is just a guy, and Ruth is just a woman. And I often think about it like this. Like you'll see media clips of Taylor Swift going somewhere, and
Yeah.
just all the Swifties are just losing their minds and having just going crazy on the side of the road, having strokes. But when Taylor Swift walks into a room that her mom is in, for her mom, Taylor Swift is just
She's
Taylor,
Taylor.
just
Yeah.
Taylor. She's not famous. She's not a global icon. And so it's almost like the relationship I feel like we should develop with these people is, oh, that's Paul.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's my forebear in this, that we don't make Paul or David into these monolithic statues, that we remember that they're people that honestly, if they were alive, they would care about us. They would want to
Yeah.
try to interface with us. I think that's important out of these things. Ehud wasn't some kind of like crazy spy guy. Ehud was a
Yeah.
guy that answered God's call.
Well, yeah, I think the reason we should do that is it helps us understand that although these people did great things, there were big sacrifices they had to
Sure.
make. I mean, they are real people, but they did make big sacrifices. But because they are real people and did these big things, we can do them too if we choose to sacrifice um, the same sort of things they sacrificed.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
Ehud had no specific like qualifications that made him. In
yeah,
fact, I mean, we're going to get there in a minute. In fact, Ehud had stuff that would disqualify him
yeah.
from being used. And maybe this is a good transition point to bring up this fact that we're telling this story, and I've referenced it a few times on purpose. The Bible always refers to Ehud as left-handed.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with what the Bible's trying to communicate there, that almost surely means that Ehud had a disability or some kind of physical weakness because
Mm.
people in that time were not left-handed. And I have a good story to illustrate
Mm.
that. We my family took a vacation to a place called Colonial Williamsburg, and it's like a 1700s town, and all the people who work there, they dress in the garb and they like
Yeah.
churn butter, and it's fun
Cool.
if
Yeah.
you're a nerd, like I am.
Yeah.
Well, we were watching this guy load a musket, and he was doing everything like right-handed. My dad was left-handed, and my dad said, well, I'm a lefty, what would I do? And the guy didn't break character, and sometimes it's kind of annoying. He's like, sir, there are no left-handed people. And what we got out of that was, in those times, from most of human history, you were just forced to be
To
right-handed,
adjust. Yeah.
forced to be right-handed, even if like there were no left-handed people. So the fact that Ehud is left-handed is telling us something about Ehud's abilities and disabilities as a person. And that's important because that is specifically like that's the one character trait we know about Ehud. This guy was left-handed, it's some kind of disability.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I sometimes, so, okay, let's see how I can put this right. I'm just exploring this idea. A lot of times we focus so much on the disabilities and the things that these people, these unqualified people have,
Mm.
that when you have people like the Taylor Swifts of the world who are qualified, you almost feel unqualified because
Mm. You
because you
don't
don't have the
have some.
disability.
Okay.
So what do you do with that? What do you, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is the way I was thinking this and framing this. Do I think that God had to use someone with a physical disability to get Israel delivered from Moab? I do not. I think Samson was probably right-handed, right? The rest of the people in the Bible, nobody else really. I guess Moses does with the speech thing
Yeah, yeah.
in. But to me, it's more of like God is not necessarily the God of disabilities. God is the God of differences. And a lot of
Okay,
the people
gotcha.
that God uses have some unique trait that draws God, and if we're honest, draws people to them too. There's something about them that stands out or is different or is remarkable in some way. And I think that's what God uses.
Yeah, I think that, okay, that puts into perspective for me because you do hear preached from the pulpit a lot. Those that have been in this situation and those that are
Yes.
brokenhearted and those that are this and
Yes.
that. And 100% the Bible is so clear about calling those people. But you're right. It's about he's a God of differences. He uses all. There's no
Hmm.
preference of persons. It's who is in front of him and willing to say, I will do what you want me to do. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it worries me too because I feel like modern culture is kind of a monoculture. And
Yeah.
here's what I mean by that. I have been in the states of Minnesota, just South Dakota and Alaska this year.
Mhm.
And I have found commercial places in all of those states where I saw, guess what? A Target, a Starbucks, 4 or 5 mattress stores, because those dang things are everywhere and it doesn't matter. You can't get away from them. And a Chipotle and a,
Ooh, I love Chipotle.
me too. But like when I drive to Fairview Heights, what I see in Fairview Heights exists everywhere in the country. And it's almost like with the internet and things like that, like my daughters use the same phrasing that kids their age use in Washington
Yeah.
State and in Florida. And it's like we're all part of this one big, huge monoculture. And sometimes it worries me that we try to hide our differences or we hide the things that make us stand out from the crowd
Okay.
because it's not conscious, right? I'm not driving to Fairview Heights like, oh, well, I better find this mattress firm. It's not a conscious thing that's being put on us, but it's just the way our society has evolved is that we're looking for sameness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I think that I think God is not. I think God's looking to draw out the parts of us that are unique and special,
Yes.
but it doesn't always. Okay. So that's my thing. Our quote unquote, like, um, weakness or disability doesn't have to look the same.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to all fit within the same funnel and the same idea. We don't all have to come from the same place. He is looking for our uniqueness to
Correct.
use. Okay.
Correct. Yes. Well, we don't know anything about Peter's strengths, weaknesses, anything like that. But I
Yeah.
can say this for sure. Like the dude was a fisherman, and that is not the the first occupation that I would think that God would want to raise up and make the first preacher
Yeah.
out of in the New
Yeah.
Testament, right?
Yeah.
But there was some trait that Peter had that made him stand out. And I just think that this to me is one of the coolest pieces about God is that God doesn't look at the same qualifications as everybody else. He's not a part of the same monoculture. The Bible says it repeatedly over and over and over again. He weighs the heart and he looks at the heart and he uses people's whose hearts are in the right place. And sometimes, maybe this is going too far and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I almost feel like God gets glee in using the left-handed people or making Moses his mouthpiece when Moses has a speech problem. It's almost like
Yeah.
God's like, yep, that's what we're doing now, right?
Yeah.
Because it like changes what I don't know, it like subverts our expectations.
Well, and I was actually thinking the same exact thing. It's
Okay.
almost like in every single person, he looks for your weakness. And the Bible says that
Yeah.
I think he wants to get you to a point where he says, oh, okay, you struggle, Hannah, with time management. I'm going to put you in positions where Lord, help me here. I'm going to put you in positions where you have to have that stuff together because it's not about what you can do. It's about what I can do. And so again, I say this all the time, but it circles back to all that glory goes to God. That's the whole
Yeah.
point here. He
Yeah.
wants to show that the Taylor Swifts of the world can have all of this talent. And I'm going to use that talent, but I'm going to pull out that weakness of hers and use and show my glory through her weakness.
How many times have you had like been sitting somewhere and there's just kind of just as one example, there's like a kind of a person who's quiet and withdrawn. They don't usually say very much, but then sometimes they'll speak up in a meeting or a social event or something, and they'll say something, and it kind of just stops everybody in their
Yeah.
tracks because when that, you know what I mean? Like when we notice that kind of person doing that. So I just, again, think, and I reference this a lot on this podcast. I think when one person does that, it feels kind of small, but that's not the way the kingdom's supposed to work. If a billion Christians all did this, you know what I mean? It would just be this tidal wave of God using people and his ability to pull stuff out from us. And I think that would really change the world.
I think so too. I think so too. And I think it allows God to be seen in ways that it's not about the person, but it's about him.
Yes. So here's what else I noticed about the story of Ehud. And again, I can't necessarily say this is completely true, but as far as what the Bible gives us, Ehud has no burning bush to call him out. Ehud has no road to Damascus to show him exactly what to do. Now, could he have had that? Maybe,
Sure.
but let's assume he doesn't have that. So let's say that Ehud feels some kind of call in some way, but does not have like direct God divine evidence that he is supposed to do this thing. You could say Ehud's acting in like gray areas. He's making decisions because of what he feels in that. What kind of lessons are there in that for us? because I don't know about you. I have never had a burning bush moment.
No,
I've never had a
no.
road to Damascus moment. We're all kind of living in this gray area. So how do we make sense of that? How do we deal with that?
I think a lot of it comes from, well, a couple things I think about. Obviously, in that time, they didn't have the spirit inside of them guiding them.
True.
But I do think we have to be aware of the spirit in us and guiding us. For example, I had a youth kid message me recently who said she just felt like she
Mm.
needed to ask a friend about something. She's
Okay.
like, I don't really know why I felt this or what, but I felt it in my spirit.
Mm.
Um, to ask about something and she didn't quite understand. And I reminded her that's the Holy Spirit guiding you and leading you. So at this time he
Right.
didn't have that. But I also think that when you understand your goal and your purpose and you know where you're going, you are able to make decisions without this divine intervention that shows you, oh, I need to do this. If we all understand the Great Commission, which is to go and to reach the lost, you're not going to wait to get a notification across your phone that says, go message this person to go to church.
It'd be really nice though,
It
God.
would be awesome, or you're not going to have a big voice in the middle of the night say, you need to volunteer to work in Sunday school.
Yeah.
You just know that's a need and you
Yeah.
just do it. We try to make things we try to mystify it too much and make
Yeah.
it too spiritual
Yeah.
when the call is right in front of us. And I think this is an example of that. They were taken captive by a group of people who they didn't want to be under anymore. And they
Nope.
were living and serving their gods and knew they needed to get out of it.
Yep.
He stood up and did what he knew he needed to do.
He stood up and shoved that sword in, baby.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, I think that this idea of the gray areas kind of ties in to what we have talked about before, and I have no doubt we'll talk about again, is that there are call them what you want to. There are guardrails or there are the outlines of what we're
Yeah.
supposed to be doing. We have all these outlines all over the place. And I think as long as you are working within those outlines and you're not stepping outside of those and doing something that would be contrary to God's word, I
Yeah.
think that that's part of the point, right? Is we have
Mm-hmm.
some autonomy to draw within those bounds and those lines. And that, in fact, is probably what God wants,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
We don't know Ehud's background, but somehow he knew how to like do the sword thing, and right. So I don't know. Maybe Ehud's kind of a rough dude. Maybe he had like a rough childhood. We really have no idea what his background is, but whatever that is, God put his hand on this guy, and then I think that Israel was delivered through Ehud's personality, through his
Yes.
weakness, through stuff that was specific to Ehud. And I don't know why that's any different for you and I, right? Or any of the people who listen to this. That's how God wants to work, is through us. And that's just the way it is.
Oh, for sure. And I say it every single week. I think it's because why we have to be reflective and know our identity and know who we are and know our strengths. Because, as much as God's going to work in your weakness, he didn't just give you strengths for no reason.
Right.
He's going to use those. So Ehud may have had a weakness in a certain area going in. Well, he did. He did have a weakness going into this. People would have assumed he couldn't do that.
Right.
But maybe he was great at creating that sword or knowing where to stab in the stomach. Maybe he knew things about anatomy that, other people didn't know. And God used that strength for the Israelites then to get out of that situation. So I think it's important to know the things that you're good at and to allow God to use those. Be what we need. I am a firm believer that what we need and the call that we have in our lives is already in us. And it's about
That's exactly
activating
right.
that.
Yes. I think we play the waiting game way too much.
Well, and then we waste time.
Yes.
What good is that?
Yes. What does God want me to do? And I want to do a larger episode about this. And so this is just an idea I'm just going to touch on and glance off, and we'll probably return to it pretty soon. I think there's also there is a way that we can overlearn the lessons from the Bible.
Sure.
And just here's what I mean by that. You and I and nobody who listens to this is ever going to be called to stab a foreign king in the gut to get God's people out from that's just not what it's going to be. And so when we read these stories, and all we're getting in the Bible is we're getting like the Sports Center highlights of the most elevated things that God has done through human beings. What we're not getting in the Bible is the day in, day out stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where most of us are. And that's why you just have to take the principles in God's word and the outlines that are already there. And you have to choose to act in them. And if you're waiting for some kind of Bible story to happen to you, it's probably not ever going to happen.
No.
I'm probably never going to have a Bible story level event happen in my life. And if I wait for it, then I have missed a lot of my opportunity to work for the kingdom.
Well, I always think back to big events in history. Like, I don't know how my granny lived through and her family lived through World War II. I don't understand how they did that.
Yeah.
But I think that my children and my grandchildren will ask, how in the world did you spend months in your home and not go into the store and not go to church because of COVID? Everything shut down, and we just did it. It was normal life. I look back at it now and it doesn't feel...
Well, it was not normal, but we got...
Well, yeah.
We continued.
We continued through it. And I think that we can get stuck in that in our own lives where we're just living and don't realize the significance of what we could be doing or what we're not doing until we get far away from it and see, oh, I could have made a difference there. I could have stepped out there. I could have learned something there.
Yeah. I think we need to be more Ehud and less what we usually do.
Yeah. Quit waiting for a moment.
Right. Understand God's got a call on us. Go ahead.
Quit waiting for the Damascus, the road to Damascus where you're called. Don't wait on the moment. Just don't wait for God to just show you this big sign in the sky. Step out and do.
Don't disqualify yourself because of some physical disability or something else that makes you different. Don't disqualify for yourself for that. That's probably the thing that God wants to use.
Yeah.
So more Ehud and less of what we normally are. And again, I think that everything about this story and so much of we talk about just comes back to we're all just trying to do our part and build the kingdom.
Yeah.
And the kingdom gets built on a daily basis by little bitty things that just continually, evolve and move into this huge tidal wave. And that's how revivals, but that's how the great things happen, is because people like you and me, everyday ordinary people, every single day make little decisions that they're going to act and they're going to color within the lines that God has already given.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's great.
We want to thank you for joining us today. We always enjoy going Beyond Sundays and hope that you enjoyed the conversation today. If you have any thoughts or comments about our topic today or anything else, please reach out to us. Go to BeyondSundaysPod.com for our show. Go to BeyondSundaysPod.com for our show links and socials. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.